Good morning or afternoon, depending on when this presentation takes place. My name is Jana Zerzová and I work at the Department of English Language and Literature, Faculty of Education, Masaryk University in the Czech Republic. I'd like to present today partial findings of my larger scale research on accommodating neurodivergent pupils in English as a foreign language classes, and I'd like to specifically focus on the teachers' needs and opinions on this today. Neurodivergent in my presentation refers to autism spectrum disorders. And we all probably know that ASD rates statistics have been rising steadily worldwide. Of course, statistics in different countries differ. In the Czech Republic, with a population of 10.5 million, the situation is such that the prevalence of autism is estimated between 1.5 and 2%, and that translates to more than 4,000 pupils diagnosed with ASD in the Czech Republic in our schools. Let's talk a bit about ASD characteristics and terminology. ASD individuals often experience problems in social interaction, communication, and participation in daily activities, and these are caused by persistent impairments in social interaction, by restricted repetitive patterns of behaviors and interests or activities. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the 5th edition, is used to diagnose ASD in the United States. However, in the Czech Republic, it is the 4th edition of the manual, and there are differences in how the manual views ASD. In the 4th edition, there was the diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, but now in the 5th edition, this is blended, and there is a broader category of ASD. However, all of my research participants with ASD were diagnosed according to the 4th edition, the old edition, and all of them were diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, and they were not aware of these changes. What they identify with is the diagnosis of the Asperger's syndrome, and these changes are slowly being introduced into Czech Republic. The 5th edition of the manual has been translated into Czech, so we are still awaiting these diagnostic changes in the Czech Republic. But here, in my presentation, ASD only refers to individuals with the Asperger's syndrome. My research aims were the following ones. I wanted to investigate the challenges ASD pupils face when taking part in English language lessons at schools, and how these challenges or how their characteristics influence classroom practices. And so here in this presentation, I'll focus on the teachers' views on this. It seems important that teachers are well trained to understand ASD, and many authors write about this. There is a quote by Bernard et al. That you can have a look. They believe that it is the subtlety of understanding that teachers cannot be expected to possess without detailed training in autism. And it is the lack of this training that will do most to ensure the failure. So it seems important that teachers, even language teachers, are well trained in the field, and I wanted to find out whether they are trained to do this or whether they have the recommended training or not, and how they feel about it. These were the main research questions. What ASD characteristics and obstacles may prevent ASD pupils from learning English effectively at school? How well prepared and supported do teachers feel when teaching ASD pupils? And how much extra time, if any, do teachers spend preparing for a lesson in which there is an ASD pupil? The research sample consisted of 40 participants. There were 10 ASD pupils, and you can see in the table that the pupils were designated letters of the alphabet to anonymize them. So in the table you can see there were 10 ASD pupils or students, A to J. Then there were 10 adults, K to T. And I also interviewed or surveyed the pupils' parents and their teachers, not so with the adults, because these are older and I wasn't able to talk to their teachers or parents. In the table, you can see that with pupil H, the parent is missing, and with pupil D, the teacher is missing. They were not willing to participate in our research in the end, so they are not included there. I decided to substitute teacher D with teacher K, because adult K was 21 years old. She has just finished secondary school studies, and teacher K was willing to participate in the research. And with pupil F, you can see that both of his parents took part in the research. As to those teachers, there were 10 of them, 1 male, 9 female. They taught at various types of schools. You can read the types here on the slide. There were experienced teachers in the sample. Their years of teaching experience range from 1 year to 35 years. 2 of them were in their 50s, 4 in their 40s, and 3 in their 30s. And 7 of them were fully qualified to teach English. Teacher J had a bachelor's degree in ELT, and there were 2 teachers who studied different fields, business administration and psychotherapy for children abroad, and then 1 teacher specialized in Czech language and literature during her studies. This is the research sample. You can have a look at the table and you'll see more information on the teachers. The last column shows whether the teacher was interviewed or whether the teacher filled in the survey. And these interviews were of various lengths, with the shortest one being about half an hour and the longest one almost 2 hours. 3 teachers decided they would fill in the survey instead of the interview. So this research obviously was qualitative, with qualitative research methods used. I aimed at data source triangulation and method triangulation. The interviews conducted were semi-structured, or the participants were filling in qualitative surveys with the same questions. And I used purposive sampling because it was really difficult to find the respondents. So I used a combination of linear snowball sampling. I addressed organizations providing services to ASD individuals. I also used social media platforms to find participants willing to take part in this research. And the final sample then consisted of 26 interviews and 13 surveys. And the data were collected during the COVID pandemic. So originally I wanted to go to schools as well and observe lessons with these ASD pupils, but it was not possible because of the pandemic. So later I decided that next to interviewing the 10 pupils, teachers and parents, I would also interview 10 adults who would be able to reflect back on what their school attendance was like and would add to the data because observations were not possible. After that, I transcribed the interviews and I conducted a combination of a deductive and inductive thematic analysis. Now we'll have a look at the findings, some of them, and first we'll have a look at the ASD characteristics or obstacles the teacher reported. It's interesting that none of the teachers reported any learning difficulties or associated diagnoses in their pupils when they were asked directly about this. However, 7 ASD pupils out of 10 or their parents reported that the pupils had been diagnosed with either ADHD or dysgraphia or multiple associated diagnoses, like with student G, for example, ADHD, hypoactivity, dysgraphia, etc. But none of the teachers, when asked this question directly, thought the pupils had ADHD, for example. The teachers were also asked whether they thought that the pupil needed a teaching assistant in the English class. And only 4 teachers said that yes, their pupils would need or would have needed one. However, their use was somewhat limited because, for example, with student G, the teacher said that he would have only needed the teaching assistant for breaks. These 4 teachers said the assistant would have been needed for communication or for social interaction assistance, but none of the teachers said that there would have been any help needed in the cognitive or sensomotor area. This is a list of ASD characteristics or obstacles that the pupils may experience in their English lessons or generally in life. And all the teachers, but also all the pupils and parents, were asked whether they thought their pupils experienced these problems in their classes. And you can see the responses in the brackets, the number and the letters for the teachers who thought that this particular characteristic was a problem in their English classes. So, for example, with number 5, you can see that none of the teachers reported any lack of imagination in their pupils. Unlike the pupils themselves, the data differ, and the opinions of the teachers and the pupils often differ, and the ASD pupils report different information than the teachers, which suggests maybe the teachers can't see the problems in their pupils. So I'll let you go through the list independently. I won't read the full list. There is 2 more slides to this. And one more on meltdowns, which is fits or shutdowns specific to ASD pupils or individuals, even adults. So you were able to see that not all of the characteristics or obstacles were actually reported by the teachers. The density was different with the items, and there were some items on the list that were not reported by any of the teachers. I wanted to find out how well prepared the teachers feel to teach ASD pupils, and after analyzing their responses, I found out that they might be divided into 3 categories. 4 teachers felt unprepared. There was a substantial level of stress some of them experienced, and I'll show you a quote by one of the teachers later. 5 teachers felt prepared to teach ASD learners, but only because of their teaching experience and their instincts, and they lacked theoretical background in the topic of ASD. And 1 teacher felt prepared theoretically, but on the other hand lacked enough experience teaching ASD pupils. This is the quote by one of the teachers, Teacher C, and I'll let you read it. So you can see this particular teacher, and she was a beginning teacher, she experienced a substantial level of stress upon receiving information about the pupil and his individual plan, because she was misinformed, or rather she lacked information on ASD. And it implies that there are a lot of teachers at schools like that who lack theoretical background on ASD, yet they teach ASD pupils in their classrooms, and they may experience substantial levels of stress because of this. I also wanted to find out how much extra time teachers spent preparing for a lesson with an ASD pupil in it. And 4 teachers reported they didn't need any extra time to prepare for the lessons, and 6 teachers said they only needed a little extra time, 15 minutes per week. And 1 teacher said she needed 15 minutes for each lesson. But that was not because of the pupil's ASD, but because this particular pupil was advanced in English and needed C1 level material so that she could develop her English further, and her classmates were not that advanced. So the teacher decided she wanted to individualize the lessons, as she wanted to provide her pupil with extra material so that she could advance her English even more. So what's the conclusion? The teachers say that teaching assistants in English classes are not always needed. Only in 4 out of 10 cases do the teachers report the need for a teaching assistant, and out of these 4, 2 of them said that the ASD pupil would not have needed the teaching assistant full-time, but only for social interaction and communication or for breaks. The teachers said they didn't need any extra substantial time for lesson preparation in 9 out of 10 cases. The teachers often say they rely on their experience in their interactions, or they rely on their instincts when lesson planning or when interacting with the ASD learners, rather than theoretical knowledge about ASD. But some of them reported they would welcome more support from the school management, they would welcome more support from special education centers or the pupils' parents, and many of them, 6 of them, said specialized teacher training for EFL teachers would be welcome, so they would appreciate a seminar targeted especially at teachers of foreign languages, so that they could translate ASD characteristics and the obstacles the pupils may face in their classes into their own teaching and into lessons that nowadays are largely based on interaction in the foreign language, which may be a challenge for the ASD pupils and as a consequence for the teachers of the ASD learners, because they need to assist them in the interactions. So that's all. There are 4 slides with references that you can have a look at later, and I believe you are probably informed about what the situation is like in your countries, so we may share that, or maybe you have questions about the contents of the presentation, because some of the parts were brief, because we wouldn't have had time enough to cover it in more detail. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be looking forward to your questions.